Andrew, hey, congratulations on your film Onyx,
Thank you.
Onyx the Fortuitous and the Talisman of Souls. There we go.
Yeah.
It's always a mouthful. And I saw this film out of Sundance, and this is one of my favorite films. I was even surprised that a fun film like that, was amongst that roster at Sundance, because there was like so many dramatic, films out of that festival, and this just came out, and I had to watch it.
That's great. I know. I think it felt a bit like an anomaly for a lot of people, but I think that wound up working in our favor. I got a lot of feedback at Sundance where people just thanked me for having something there that was nothing against heavy films. I love them too. But I think people liked watching Onyx just to have a little laugh and feel a little silly for an hour and a half, you know?
That is true. That is true. So we have to ask Andrew is where the original idea came from for an Onyx movie. I know it's based off of a lot of your YouTube shorts.
Yes, I've been doing the character for about 10 years online in various different formats. Mostly I film him and I splice him into existing newscasts. And then those went viral and I started making proper shorts, sketches, and a web series with him. And over the years, I had pitched different versions of an Onyx feature, but they were always to companies that were looking to fill a certain slot they needed filled with whatever comedy they could find. So it might be an Onyx Ali G movie, or what if Onyx were in a Jackass type format? And it was never necessarily a framing device that I felt was natural to the character. And so when it came time to try to get a feature off the ground through crowdfunding, because that was ultimately my only way forward to get a proper feature going, and I wound up loving the process, I thought, well, what genre would I want to see Onyx in? And it's the subgenre of horror comedy, and specifically comedy horror that kind of throws back to the films from the 80s, like Fright Night and Gremlins, etc. And it really was because that's what I wanted to see most.
Now, how did you manage to craft the story? Because if people watch the after the credits, there are bits and parts of some of your YouTube in as an Easter eggs into the storyline. I mean that is obviously you crafted the story based around that. You didn't come up with the story way beforehand, right?
Well, no, but what I found was what I learned about Onyx very early on was that a joke that might feel like an aside or like something very fleeting ultimately becomes a little breadcrumb to follow in his narrative moving forward and also in his backstory. So in the first video, he said, maybe I'm not Mark who works at Arby's. Maybe I'm Onyx the Fortuitous, Slayer of the Bright Realm. That's kind of just a silly joke. Oh, well, that guy has self-aggrandizing thoughts and thinks he's a lot bigger of a deal than he is. But ultimately, now 10 years later, there's a movie about whether or not Onyx is, in fact, the fortuitous one and the Slayer of the Bright Realm. So with Onyx, I always like taking these little things and making them a lot bigger and not letting them fade away. And when I went to write the feature, I would just go on hikes and think of certain scenes that I would imagine happening in a film of this subgenre. And if it happened to connect to a previous joke, I just made sure to write that down and make sure it wound up in the film. So it was really just a matter of the ideas kind of linking up in a very just not purposeful way. It was very like word association, and then I tethered it back to the original videos.
You've you've been playing this character for 10 years now. I'm actually amazed at the consistency how you could actually turn Onyx on and off. How do you do that?
Well, originally it was more difficult, and a lot of performers talk about how there's kind of key phrases that get them into certain characters. And so for Onyx, for a long time, it was just saying, I'm Onyx Fortuitous, Slayer of the Bright Realm. I don't know. And saying his name would kind of get me primed. And I would have to do that before every video shoot, or say a couple of different lines before every video shoot that just kind of got me into the pocket. But now I've done him so much that there's no priming necessary. I mean, on set, I'd be talking to my DP or talking with other actors. And then as soon as everything's set, I would just say, okay, we're ready to go. All right, and action. Oh, hey. And then you're just in it. There's no changeover time needed.
I, I'm so thankful that I'm carrying this conversation with you because I wanted to know, you know, how you actually talk in real life
Right, right, right.
because it's just a curiosity because anyone who watches that going, there's no possible way he talks like that in real life.
Well, the more coffee I have, or the more anxious I feel, the more I sound like Onyx. So you'll catch a glimpse of him every now and again.
So coffee's the secret. That is terrific.
Coffee is the secret. I went off of coffee for 20 something days and then had to do a long shoot day in character. And I realized, wow, it's really that caffeine that clicks me over into Onyxville.
Now, Olivia Taylor Dudley is it's not just she's another star in your film. She's a prime collaborator. I actually realized after seeing those credits.
Oh,
Can,
yeah.
can you talk about bringing her? How did you bring her on board, and how she actually helped you with this film?
Well, we've made things together for a very long time. We made a few shorts almost, actually, probably 10 years ago is when we first started making things together. And since then, she's been somebody that I send scripts to and get feedback from. And there's only a couple people that I do that with, and she's one of them. And with Onyx, it was no different. And I think, especially because of the speed in which we had to turn this around to get it done in time, because my goal was to submit it in time for Sundance, which we wound up premiering at. She really was the producer that was, I almost became the editor in post, and she was the producer and director in ways, because as an editor, I really get into editor mode and I cut based on physical continuity, and I'll look for performance, but I'm really stringent as an editor. And she would be the person there saying, you've got a funnier take than that. I remember I was there on the day. So she really helped shape the script at the script stage by being one of the only people that gives me feedback through that process. And then on set, because I'm on camera so much, it's really her and my DP Dan that are giving me notes. And I trust them. And they're two of the only people that kind of know how to pop in and talk to me in a way that's not going to throw me off my axis. And then in post, she was the producer there, really being that second set of eyes. And weirdly, sometimes I would want something cut that she would fight to keep it, because Onyx doesn't necessarily make me laugh as much as he might make other people laugh. She might say, that's a really funny bit, leave that in. And I might say, I don't know, that bit's old, you know? And, but that's kind of how we work. It's just like a constant feedback loop throughout the whole process.
I mean, I do have to admit, I didn't realize how much of a, a bootstrap indie project that you actually created because by watching this film, I could barely even tell that this was an indie project because there's a huge contrast between, YouTube shorts and a full length feature film. Especially, I didn't realize you were the one that was editing the whole movie until I saw the credits.
Yeah, well, that's good. Hopefully, you couldn't watch the film and say, I think the star of this edited it, because then that might be a bad sign. But yeah, I just over the years, I've been built into it's the wrong connotation to say one man band, because it involves a lot of people, Olivia included, but one man band in the sense that I needed to become an editor to get my short projects over the line. I needed to honestly remain being an actor because I couldn't get friends to act in things. And I grew up acting since I was very little. And I like writing to shoot, and I like shooting to edit. And now I look back and realize I think that was always what I was going to become, is somebody that has their their hand throughout the entire process. I also just love the entire process. I really enjoy it all the way through sound design and score and color. But it's a also a compliment that you didn't feel like it felt as small as it could have, given its roots, which was definitely our hope and our intention.
So what's the your personal conversion to a full length feature film from, from a lot of shorts? What was that a difficult process? Because I'm not even sure if you have directed a full length feature film before.
I have actually. This is my fourth feature, but the other features are very experimental. One's a mockumentary, one's found footage. They definitely took tenacity and fortitude, but not of this scope. This was definitely the largest production. But I used to work for a company called Nerdist, and we created content weekly, and I was the in-house director. So every week, it was a bit like an SNL schedule. I was in charge of their digital shorts, and every week would be a different genre parody or different music video parody or commercial parody or live stream or comedy sketch or short. So that really got me into the practice of being in a production cycle pretty much nonstop. And it wasn't difficult to then stretch those muscles over the course of shooting an entire feature and editing an entire feature, because my job at Nerdist for 6 or 7 years was pretty much doing that all the time. In fact, I think I wanted to do things a little too quick because I was used to the internet's production cycle. So when I said, hey, I want to have this done in time to submit to Sundance, and we wrapped in July and needed to submit in September, people around me were like, what? But we did it. So
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize you had a lot of experience from the Nerdist. That explains a lot, actually, too.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I directed a lot of branded content and even content for Funny or Die with like Bruce Campbell for Ash versus Evil Dead. And yeah, so I definitely had directed too many shorts over the last 5 or 6 years. Some that the internet cares about and some that, no one cares about.
Now, in the aspect of I want to say that the demons and ghouls, the creature feature of this, could you tell us how you came up with the designs and who helped you creating this, basically pop it into your film?
Well, it really came down to finding Adam Doherty, who goes by the moniker Creature Kid. And I saw his work at a horror convention many years ago called Monster Palooza out in Burbank, and loved his work because it had this grotesque realism, but with like the dimensions and color of animation. He did a large life-size replica of Witch Hazel from Looney Tunes. And when I wrote the Onyx script, I thought maybe Adam could tackle the beefy bad boy, just that one puppet. I thought everything else would be a makeup. And including the giant demon, I thought would be a man in a creature suit. So I sent the script to Adam, and he said, well, what if they were all puppets? And when he said that, I realized that's much more in line with all of the things that inspired the Onyx film, especially a lot of the kind of darker Jim Henson work. And I gave Adam free reign, and he ideated. So many of those characters do not look like what I had initially pictured. It really was what him and his team did with them. Beefy bad boy was kind of what was scripted, and the ghouls were always meant to be that exaggerated, sunken in cheekbones and bulbous eyes. But it's Adam and his team that really gave them all the personality and looks that they eventually had.
So it was careful puppeteering by Adam's team that actually, because their movements are so realistic. Their facial features are
Yeah.
terrific.
Well, their team, and I think actually this was the first feature that he was a department head on, and I think it was the first feature that many of his puppeteers worked on. But we shot a proof of concept sizzle reel with the creatures when we were looking for further financing, and that also worked as a bit of like research and development for them and their creations, because we shot the sizzle reel and realized, well, this character needs to be lighter, or this one needs to be more flexible, or we need to change how we built the arms or torso on this one. And we were able to then dial it in further before the actual shoot.
I'm curious because your film is now completed. Where are these creatures now? I mean, I I would have loved to have the box demon in my living room and scare the shit out of people, but
Yeah. Well, I work out of my garage. I have a little office in my garage, and the box demon was there for many, many months. Now he is in a storage unit along with everyone else. We have 2 storage units, and Beefy Bad Boy and Box Demon are in one, and then the ghouls and Abaddon, the 9 foot tall demon, is in pieces in another. And they're all in the storage units until the Smithsonian calls. But hopefully they'll survive in those storage units because they're such beautiful fabrications.
Now it's also interesting that you found an interesting building to basically have it as the base of your that the house that everyone runs around in. And could you tell us about this? What was it? Was this a museum or something?
So it is a Gilded Age museum and mansion in Lenox, Massachusetts. My brother-in-law found it just from Googling mansions, Massachusetts. We wanted to shoot on the East Coast. I'm from Maryland originally. I have family in Massachusetts, and I felt like it was a very New England horror film. And when I saw photos of Ventford Hall, I just thought that is Bartok's mansion, because it's beautiful, but it is still menacing, and it has these really sharp spires on the top and red brick. So there's something that doesn't feel quite welcoming about it, even though on the inside it's very warm and inviting in ways. And I called Ventford, and they were one of the first locations I called, and they were immediately amenable to having the conversation, at least having the conversation around what would it look like if a film production came here. And they had, I think, 2 other film productions shoot there in the past, and but none, I think, for as long as we would be there, and not taking up as much space as we needed to take up. And it wound up being a match made in heaven, hell, depending on your definition. It was wonderful. We also got access to a Shakespeare and Company theater campus nearby that gave us space to have our creature shop there, a little pop-up creature shop. We were able to use Shakespeare and Company's dorms for our some of our crew. Lenox, Massachusetts, and the Berkshires really became the heart of the movie, definitely from a production standpoint.
Was it also filmed in a real cemetery?
No, we actually lost our cemetery location days before. It was meant to be filmed at an actual cemetery, and it was going to be a big company move. We were going to have school buses out there with heaters inside to keep people warm and tents. And the cemetery location backed out at the last minute. And so my producers were very smart, and the money that was allocated to pay for that location went into our art department to just build a little cemetery behind Ventford Hall, which was a lifesaver, because it was much easier to pop out to the cemetery if we had forgotten anything, get pickups, go right back into the mansion, as opposed to a big company move, 15 minutes down the road to an actual cemetery.
Wow, that is terrific. Well, one last thing, Andrew, because I love a
Yeah,
lot of the pop culture references, that people could catch, like Beetlejuice and so on. But I have
yeah.
to ask, tell us about you and Olivia singing Meatloaf. I mean, I love that recreation.
Well, I'm a musical theater kid, grown up, and I also was in a band in the early 2000s outside of Washington, D.C. And so I have a little bit of a chip on my shoulder that I never became quite successful enough as a singer as I felt like I deserved. So any project of mine, I'm going to write that there's a scene where I sing. And people, my producers said, well, but wouldn't Onyx sing kind of bad? It'd be kind of cringy. And I said, no, he needs to sing good, and everybody needs to think I have a good voice. And so I constructed the Meatloaf sequence. It happened to fit thematically, but to be honest, I don't think I realized how much it fit thematically until we started going through the lyrics, and Olivia and I started singing it and deciding what part of the original song would be included in this parody version. And I realized it actually kind of points to some plot elements of Talisman of Souls. So it wound up being even more aligned than I expected, even though it was born out of a little bit of ego and my fixation with that music video that I saw on a loop as a child.
Well, it is great. Well, Andrew, thank you for this conversation. And let's remind everyone that it's coming out in theaters one day only on, correct me if I'm wrong, October 19th.
19th, that's right. Yeah, that's correct. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for carrying this conversation. I can't wait for you to bring those creatures back out of the warehouse for a
I hope
sequel.
so.
So
I would love
let,
that.
let's do this again. Thank you.
Thank you.